You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hi, welcome to another episode of The Soul Forge. This is number 293.
Welcome to the Soul Forge, a place of silent mystery, quiet contemplation, and outright mayhem. Join your host, Sean Vanderloo, as he guides you through the adventures of living. Together, we'll talk about life and love, sex and dating, joy and heartache, memories and loss, and so much more. Don't worry, it's not nearly as pretentious as it sounds. Get ready for life, the universe, and everything on the Soul Forge.
Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. It's Sean, back at you with another episode, a solo episode this time. No, not Han Solo, it's Star Trek, not Star Wars this week. What? Star Trek? That's not a Soul Forge type episode, is it? Well, of course it is, because we talk about life, the universe, and everything here on Soul Forge, and Star Trek is just one of those things that are a part of life. And the reason that we're talking about it this week is because today is June 15th, 2023, and it is the premiere date for Season 2 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So I thought, what better way to celebrate than do a primer on Star Trek and how to watch it. And this is a great episode for you, even if you've never watched Star Trek, you don't care about Star Trek and those bumpy-headed aliens. It's all good. I'm just going to talk a little bit about it, my love for it, and all that kind of good stuff. So I thought the best way to go about doing that would be to talk about my history with the franchise, and then we would get into how to watch it, either in release date or chronological order, or however you prefer.
At the edge of the universe, 400 men and women are probing the immeasurable blackness of space. Their leaders are an Earthman with no fear and a stranger with no heart. Travel beyond our time and solar system, into new galaxies, into worlds beyond your dreams. Star Trek, every week, in color on the NBC television network.
So my earliest memories of Star Trek are in the late 70s, maybe early 80s. Hard to say exactly when that was because it was so long ago. I live in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, Canada, and I did back then as well. And I think it was Saturday afternoons that Star Trek would come on, and it was Channel 4 here, but it was Fox 50 out of Detroit, and it would be the original series with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy and all the rest. And maybe it was every day of the week, but I just happened to vaguely recall 40-some years ago that was probably Saturday afternoons, and I watched it. Didn't know what it was, and not even sure what the first episode may have been that I had seen. Maybe That Which Survives, but I'm not 100% sure because it's just vague memories of 4 decades ago. And how am I supposed to know what that was like when I was like 3 and 4 or 5 years old? I don't think anybody introduced me to it, but there it was. I was watching it. It was one of the things that I saw when I was a kid. I don't know if anybody else was around, maybe my grandparents. Who knows? Hard to say. So that's what I remember. And then Star Trek The Next Generation came out when I was 11, and I believe I watched the premiere episode. I didn't really know what it was, but I followed it along. My good buddy Andrew, he watched it as well. He was a huge fan. He used to make things out of cardboard, like phaser rifles and tricorders and you name it. He could make anything out of anything. And you've heard him on the podcast before. He's my oldest friend, actually. That's my earliest memories, and then in the early 90s, Playmates Toys decided to make action figures, and I had to have them, and Andrew collected as well. I had to have more than he did, because I was in quiet, silent competition just to have more stuff, because he had the coolest toys growing up, like Thundercats and G.I. Joe and Lego and all that stuff. So yeah, we collected, and now I guess I've got the most toys, but does that make me a winner or just having to move a lot of stuff? I don't know. What is Star Trek? It is the vision of the future from Gene Roddenberry, who I believe was born, let me think. Well, I don't know. I didn't look that up. I think he was born in 1931, maybe. No, wait. No, that doesn't sound right. 1921? Something like that, anyway. Yeah, let's go with 1921. And he died in 1991. Yeah, he was 70 years old when he died, so that makes sense. He was in the Army, or no, in the Air Force. I didn't look any of this up. I just have a lot of memories of things that I've read. Yeah, he was a cop, and he was a television writer, and he was in World War II. And in the early 60s, he came up with his vision of the future, a utopian version of humanity.
That future, that space station, all those people, they exist in here. In my mind, I created it. That future, I created it, and it's real.
In 1965, they shot the first pilot called The Cage with Captain Pike, Number One, and Spock. And the studio, or I think it was the studio, it was NBC anyway, they said it was too cerebral. So in an unprecedented move, which never happens, they said, here's some money, go shoot another pilot, which was called Where No Man Has Gone Before. And that launched the series that ran from 1966 to 1969 with William Shatner as Kirk and Leonard Nimoy as Spock and DeForest Kelley as McCoy and all the rest. And that had 79 episodes. And then it was canceled just before the moon landing in 1969. A few years later, they came out with 22 episodes of the animated series, which ran from, I think, 73 to 74. Then they tried out throughout the 70s to get Star Trek Phase 2 going, another series. And then they went back and forth. Are we going to do a movie? Are we going to do a series? And then, of course, in 1977, Star Wars came out. And they're like, oh, there's money in space. So let's make it a movie. So that's how 1979's Star Trek The Motion Picture came out. And that was 10 years after the cancellation of the series. And that never happened. You didn't make movies out of a dead television show. So the original series crew had 6 movies. They had Star Trek The Motion Picture in 1979, and then they had The Wrath of Khan in 82. In 84, they had Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. In 86, they had The Voyage Home, that's the one with the whales. In 1989, William Shatner directed Star Trek The Final Frontier, where they went to find God, and they asked the immortal question, what does God need with a starship? And then in 1991, for the 25th anniversary, they released their final film, Star Trek The Undiscovered Country. Back in 1987, that was the launch of Star Trek The Next Generation with Patrick Stewart as Captain Picard, and that ran for 7 seasons from 87 to 94. And of course, there was all kinds of controversy when that series came out because that's not Star Trek. It doesn't have Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. It can't be real Star Trek. The debates continued for years. And then in 1993, Star Trek Deep Space Nine came out. In 95, Star Trek Voyager came out with the first female captain to helm a series. And then in 2001, Star Trek Enterprise came out, and that lasted to 2005. So the original series lasted 3 seasons. Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager all had 7 seasons, and then I guess franchise fatigue set in, and Enterprise only got 4 seasons, and the 4th season was when it got really, really good, so it was canceled before its time. The team, the behind-the-scenes people, a lot of them were together for the full 18 years, from 87 to 2005, and that was very sad when it went off the air, and we thought Star Trek was dead. But no, in 2009, J.J. Abrams came out with his Kelvin Universe series of films. And then in 2017, we had Star Trek Discovery, and that launched the next golden age of Star Trek. So, what are the series and what are the release orders? Okay, so we have Star Trek, the original series. That takes place in the years starting 2266. The animated series is sometime around then as well. Star Trek The Next Generation starts in 2365, and that goes for, let's see, from 87 to 2001 when Voyager ended. That was 14 years, so to 2380-ish. And then when Star Trek Enterprise came out, it was a prequel series. It takes place even before the original series, which you remember was 2266. Enterprise 2151 is when that started. And then we had in 2017 Star Trek Discovery, and that was also kind of a prequel, but a sequel to Enterprise because it takes place 10 years or so before the original series. So in 2256 instead of 2266. And then we've got Star Trek Picard that had 3 seasons, and that took place around 2399 to 2402 or so. Star Trek Lower Decks is the cartoon that came out a few years back. Its 4th season is coming out this August, and that takes place around 2380s or so. And then Star Trek Prodigy is another cartoon meant for kids, and that takes place a similar time frame. And then Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which of course is released in season 2 today. That takes place, it's kind of a sequel series to Star Trek Discovery, and takes place around 2259, 5 or 6, 7 years before the original series. And that is actually the longest pilot to series pickup in history of television, because the Cage with Captain Pike was in 1965, and then Strange New Worlds picked up on that kind of pilot. And it was 55 years later that it took in order for that to come through. So, everybody loves Captain Pike and Spock and Number One. And I've been anticipating season 2 eagerly. It's got Anson Mount as Captain Pike. And he's dreamy. If you've ever seen the show Hell on Wheels, he's in that. Fantastic actor, handsome man, and a really nice guy too, because I follow him on, I think, Instagram and maybe somewhere else. We've got Ethan Peck as Spock. We've got Rebecca Romijn as Number One. I always wanted to call her Rebecca Romijn Stamos, even though they're not married anymore. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. So those are the series. And if you want to watch it in that order, the way it was produced, you'll see how the the production values have gone from bad to better, with more money these days. And the original series had a very limited budget, and they had to use whatever they could for props and stuff. And now it's movie quality. But before we talk about how to watch it in chronological order, let's play a promo for another podcast right here on the ESO Network.
For over 6 years, the 42 Cast has worked to provide panels discussing topics from every corner of the geekosphere. Continue with us as we count down to episode 200 and try something a little different. Celebrity guest contributions. Yes, Emma Dumont from The Gifted is partnering with us to talk about science, movies, and so much more. You can only find this great content on the 42 Cast. It's your ultimate answer to fandom, geekiness, and everything.
Okay, and we're back. So, if you want to watch Star Trek in the order that it comes out, not the way it was produced through the history of television, but in order of how the series works, you go like this. First, you start with Star Trek Enterprise. Takes place between the years 2151 and 2161. You got Star Trek The Cage, that's the original series pilot, which takes place in the year 2254. Star Trek Discovery's seasons 1 and 2 are 2256 to 58. And then we've got, like I said, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, 2259. The original series, 2265 to 2269. And the animated series is 2269 to 2270. The first Star Trek films, the 6 films with the original crew, 2273 to 2293. Then you got Star Trek The Next Generation, which takes place from 2364 to 2370. The Star Trek films 2293 because Star Trek Generations was the crossover with Kirk and Picard, so that takes place, of course, 2293. But the films actually go up to Nemesis, which is 2379. And don't worry, I'll put all this in the show notes so you can actually see it if you're more of a visual learner. Star Trek Deep Space Nine takes place between 2369 and 2375. Star Trek Voyager is 2371 to 2378. Star Trek Lower Decks starts in 2380. Star Trek Prodigy is 2383. And then you got Star Trek Picard, seasons 1 to 3. And like I said, 2399 to 2402. And then you've got Star Trek Discovery season 3 and 4, and probably 5 when it comes out next year, in the 32nd century. So that is very exciting. There's so much cool stuff. There's over 800 episodes. There's a lot of variation in the production value. There's the whole debacle with the Klingons and how they've changed from series to series. In the original show, they were just people in blackface with goatee beards and silvery gold uniforms. In the first movie in 1979, the motion picture, you saw there started to get some bumpy foreheads. Then you really got the bumpy foreheads in the Next Generation, and they were pretty much consistently like that throughout the next 18 years. In Star Trek Enterprise, they showed some smooth skin Klingons because of genetic augmentation. But then when Star Trek Discovery came out back in 2017, the Klingons didn't look anything like we were used to, and they were different, and it freaked out a lot of people. And even in the J.J. Abrams Kelvin movies, they looked a little bit different. But now, according to the trailers for Star Trek Strange New Worlds, they're going to look like we're used to from the Next Generation era. So that's a big thing. They do that, though. Like when they have more money in the budget, they make the ships look different. They make the aliens look different. And it's, you either are a stickler for canon, which means a consistent story, or you just enjoy the shows for what they are. And canon is a huge thing. It's like the law or the Bible of the universe. This can't have happened because that contradicts something that was said some other time. The new show since 2017, they try to stick to canon, but they're not a slave to it. And that's probably why Star Trek Discovery jumped from the 23rd century to the 32nd, so they could be unshackled from canon and just go from there. Anyway, regardless of all that, it's a great show. It's philosophical. It's about moral dilemmas. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of talking. There's a lot of different things. My mom could never get into it because she said, "Oh, I just don't get the bumpy headed aliens." But if you look past all that and you just look at the stories, there's a lot of good stuff to think about, and it's philosophical, it's silly, it's fun. Anything can be a Star Trek show. There's so many different ways to go about doing it. In fact, next year they're talking about doing a Star Trek Academy series where it's a bunch of probably teenagers and early 20-year-olds going to school to learn how to be Starfleet officers. They're also doing a Section 31 movie with Michelle Yeoh. It was going to be a series, but she's too busy. She's an Oscar winner now, so they're just going to do a movie, and they might just do television movies every once in a while. We don't know. It's always up in the air, but it's exciting. It's the pop culture thing I love the most in all of the universe. I know more about Star Trek than I do about most things in life. I've got so many things: Hallmark ornaments, action figures, ship replicas, posters, other things that I can't even think about. Just too much stuff. Books, you name it, and I probably got something to do with it. It got to be a little bit obsessive at points. I've been slacking away from it a little bit, trying not to collect as much, because what am I going to do with it? It just takes up a lot of room. It's heavy. It collects a lot of dust. But I still love it, and I can't wait to watch Season 2 of Strange New Worlds when it comes out today. So that is your primer on Star Trek. It's just a little bit of a history, a little bit of a taste. If you want to know more, of course, you can go to the Wikipedia. You can send me an email at soulforgepodcast@gmail.com, and I can tell you what I know. But other than that, I hope you're all taking care of yourselves and each other. Enjoy Season 2 of Strange New Worlds tonight, and until next time,
Remember,
the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Soul Forge Podcast. Your support is greatly appreciated, and we hope you'll tune in again next time. Remember that you can visit soulforgepodcast.com for all of our social media links, and don't forget to share the show with everyone you know. The Soul Forge Podcast is your best source for living your best life.
Think about it.
Jean-Luc, Jordy Specs, mysteries on the holodecks, asteroids, triple droids, telepathic betazoids, transporter, deadly claw, visitor from LA Law, photons, no Kirk, captain has gone berserk, shuttlecraft, Council Troy, Dr. Crusher's little boy, Klingon rights, parasites, new heights, phaser fights, Data's head, Tasha's dead, Riker's hanging by a thread, celebration, transformations, everyone to battle station. Start the series. It's the next generation on your favorite station. We didn't start the series, but when we are gone, it'll still be on. We didn't start the series. It's the next generation on your favorite station. We didn't start the series.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.